Breaking news. The hip-hop world just witnessed a moment that shook fans across the globe. Inside a packed courtroom, all eyes were locked on one man, Lil Durk. The same Durk who turned his struggles into music, who transformed pain into anthems, and who built an unshakable bond with millions of fans. But this time, it wasn't about sold-out concerts or chart-topping singles. This time, it was about his freedom. Imagine the scene, the heavy silence of the courtroom. The judge seated high above, lawyers lined with documents in hand, reporters scribbling every word, and cameras rolling to capture history. Outside, fans gathered, holding their breath, desperate to know what the future of their favorite rapper would be. And then the moment came. The judge lifted the gavel and announced Lil Durk's release date. The room froze, and Durk. His face told 1,000 stories at once. Relief, pain, gratitude, fear, emotions flashed across his expression as he processed the weight of that decision. This wasn't just a legal update. This was a life-changing chapter unfolding right in front of the world. Social media exploded instantly. Twitter lit up with hashtags. Instagram feeds filled with reaction clips. YouTube commentary channels rushed to upload their takes. Fans everywhere were divided, some crying tears of joy, some skeptical of what comes next. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just news. This was a turning point in hip-hop history. But here's the real question. Is this release date the start of true freedom, or just another ninja to follow him? In this video, we're going deep inside the courtroom scenes. Inside the emotions that headlines didn't capture. And inside the reactions of fans who see Durk not just as an artist, but as a symbol of resilience. So stay locked in, because this isn't just an update. This is a breaking story that could change the direction of one of hip-hop's most powerful voices. The story of Lil Durk's courtroom moment doesn't start inside the walls of that courthouse. It starts years back, in the streets of Chicago, where a young Durk Derek Banks was fighting battles most people can't even imagine. Long before he was known as the voice of the trenches, he was just another kid trying to survive the chaos of a city where opportunity was scarce. And violence was always around the corner. Music wasn't just his passion, it was his lifeline. Every verse he wrote, every track he recorded, carried pieces of his reality. That honesty, that rawness, is what made millions connect with him. But while the music was his escape, the streets never really let him go. Courtrooms, police reports, and headlines followed him just as much as platinum plaques and sold-out tours. That duality, success in music versus struggles with the law, has been a theme throughout his career. And this latest courtroom scene was another chapter in that story. When Lil Durk walked into that courtroom, it wasn't as a superstar rapper. It wasn't as the man with millions of streams and collaborations with the biggest names in hip-hop. It was as a defendant, someone waiting to hear what the justice system had decided for him. That's the reality that hit fans so hard. Seeing their favorite artist stripped of fame, sitting quietly in a courtroom, reminded everyone of just how fragile life can be. The atmosphere inside was tense. Journalists shuffled through their notes, security kept strict order, and even the judge's voice carried extra weight because of the presence of cameras. Everyone there knew this wasn't an ordinary hearing. This was a cultural moment. The stakes were higher because Lil Durk wasn't just fighting for his own future, he was carrying the hopes of fans, the love of his community, and the attention of an entire industry. As the proceedings began, the judge carefully went through the details. Lawyers presented their arguments, referencing past charges, circumstances, and behaviors. Durk sat still, hands folded, his eyes moving between the judge and his legal team. Every word spoken carried weight. Fans who had managed to sneak peeks into the courtroom described the mood as unbearable tension. And then, it came the announcement. The judge's words cut through the silence. Lil Durk's release date was officially confirmed. For a split second, the room seemed frozen in time. Then came the wave of reactions. Some sighed in relief. Others whispered in disbelief. Cameras flashed, trying to capture every detail of Durk's face and his reaction. It was one of the most powerful moments of the day. He didn't jump up, he didn't cheer, and he didn't cry out loud. Instead, his expression carried a storm of emotions, relief at finally having clarity. Gratitude for the chance to move forward, but also a heavy reminder of everything that led him to that seat. It was a look that spoke louder than any words could. Outside, fans erupted. Some celebrated as though it was their own family being released. Others prayed that Durk would finally have peace and focus on his career without the shadow of legal troubles. Social media platforms turned into live reaction hubs. Hashtags like #FreeDurk and #DurkHome soon began trending instantly. The world wasn't just watching, they were participating. But beneath all the noise and excitement, one thing was clear. This wasn't just about music anymore. This was about resilience, about surviving a system that often feels stacked against people like Durk. His journey symbolized something bigger than himself. For many fans, especially those who related to his struggles, this moment represented the idea that no matter how dark things get, there's always a chance to stand up again. Of course, the announcement of a release date also raised questions. Would Durk be able to leave the past behind? Would the industry embrace him without hesitation? Or would he face judgment from critics who only see his controversies? More importantly, would he be able to use this moment as a turning point, not just for his music, but for his life? The first part of this story isn't just about what happened in the courtroom. It's about context, the years of struggle, the weight of fame, the mistakes, and the victories that brought Lil Durk to this very moment. It's about understanding why this wasn't just another headline, but a cultural event that fans will remember for years to come. And as the world waits for that release date to finally arrive, one thing is certain: Lil Durk's story is far from over. In fact, many would say it's just beginning a brand new chapter. The announcement of Lil Durk's release date spread like wildfire, turning a simple courtroom update into a cultural earthquake. Within minutes of the gavel hitting, every major platform carried the story. TMZ Complex, XXL, and countless blogs rushed to publish headlines. But the real impact wasn't in the media coverage. It was in the way fans reacted. Across Chicago, you could feel the energy shift. Supporters painted murals, blasted his tracks through car speakers, and recorded videos celebrating as if one of their own family members had just been freed. In Atlanta, where Durk had also built strong connections, people gathered outside clubs and studios, chanting his name while his music played in the background. Online, hashtags like #WelcomeBackDurk and #DurkHomeSoon lit up Twitter. TikTok was flooded with tribute edits, and Instagram timelines turned into non-stop feeds of his images and videos. For fans, this wasn't just another rap headline. Lil Durk had become more than an artist. He was a voice that represented struggle, resilience, and survival. His music spoke to people who had been through similar pain, who understood loss, and who saw him as someone carrying their stories into the spotlight. The release date wasn't just about him stepping back into the world. It was about an entire community feeling like they too had won a victory. Behind the scenes, the industry was buzzing. Record labels, promoters, and streaming platforms all saw this as one of the biggest moments in hip-hop. Executives began calling producers, managers, and marketing teams, already brainstorming what his comeback could look like. Some wondered if he would drop a surprise single immediately. Others speculated about an album reflecting on everything he had endured. There were even quiet conversations about a documentary capturing this exact journey. Because everyone knew Durk's story wasn't just personal. It was history in the making. But in the middle of all this noise, the emotional weight on Durk himself couldn't be ignored. For him, this wasn't just about headlines or future business opportunities. It was about survival. Over the years, he had lost so many people close to him: friends, collaborators, even family. Each loss left scars that could never fully heal. And now, as he sat in that courtroom hearing the words "release date," those memories must have hit him harder than anyone could see. His expression carried it all: relief, gratitude, pain, and the heavy reminder of everything it took just to reach that point. Not everyone was celebrating, though. Critics were quick to raise questions about the justice system and whether celebrities receive special treatment. Some pointed to his past controversies, arguing that the music industry shouldn't glorify figures with criminal histories. These debates turned social media into a battleground. On one side, supporters defended him as a product of his environment who deserved redemption. On the other, skeptics questioned whether society should continue giving second chances to artists who constantly find themselves in legal trouble. The clash of opinions only made the story bigger. Whether you loved him or hated him, everyone was talking about him. His name was everywhere, and his situation sparked conversations not just about music, but about culture, justice, and redemption. As the days rolled on, the anticipation only grew stronger. Fans started online countdowns, posting daily reminders of how many days were left until freedom. Memes spread across social media, tribute videos went viral, and speculation about his first post-release track dominated hip-hop circles. Would he come back swinging with a hard drill anthem to remind everyone of his roots? Or would he release something emotional, pouring out his feelings about everything he had endured in court and in life? For Durk, those days of waiting were just as important as the release itself. They tested his patience, his mental strength, and his ability to stay grounded while the world placed the weight of their expectations on his shoulders. Those close to him hinted that he was already planning carefully, thinking about how to turn this moment into something bigger than just a comeback. He knew the stakes. He knew the world was watching, and that's why this moment mattered so much. It wasn't only about a man walking free. It was about what would come next, about whether he would rise as a stronger, wiser version of himself, or whether old challenges would pull him back into the same cycle. The countdown wasn't just for Lil Durk, it was for everyone waiting, watching, and wondering how this chapter would unfold as the countdown to Lil Durk's release continued. Anticipation grew to a fever pitch. Every day that passed seemed to add new layers to the conversation. Fans were no longer just talking about when he would come home. They were imagining what the return would look like, how it would sound, and what kind of impact it would have on the culture. For many, this wasn't just a rapper coming back to the stage. This was the rebirth of an icon, a chance to rewrite the narrative of his life. Durk's career had always been defined by dualities. On one hand, he was a platinum-selling artist, collaborating with the likes of Drake, Future, and Lil Baby, performing in front of thousands of people across the world. On the other hand, he carried the weight of Chicago's trenches on his shoulders, a past filled with violence, loss, and constant battles. His music balanced those two sides, and it was that authenticity that made his fanbase so loyal. They saw him as someone who had lived their reality and turned it into art. Now, with his release date set, everyone wondered which side of Durk would step into the spotlight first. The streets, of course, were ready to welcome him back as a hero. In neighborhoods across Chicago, you could feel the pride building. For young kids growing up in the same environment Durk came from, his return symbolized something bigger than just music. It was proof that even when the system tries to hold you down, you can still rise. Parents, older fans, and even community leaders echoed similar sentiments that Durk's story could be a reminder of resilience and hope. Meanwhile, in the industry, there was no denying the buzz. Producers and artists began dropping hints online, posting subtle tweets and Instagram captions that suggested they were already preparing for a collaboration. Some even teased that unreleased tracks with Durk might surface once he was out. The idea of him stepping into the booth with fresh energy and a renewed hunger was enough to send fans into a frenzy. There was a collective belief that whatever he dropped next would be explosive, both musically and emotionally. But while all of this excitement painted the picture of a fairy tale comeback, there was still the other side of the story, the pressure. Lil Durk wasn't just walking into freedom, he was walking into expectations bigger than ever before. Every headline, every tweet, every post from fans created an atmosphere where people weren't just hoping for greatness, they were demanding it. They wanted answers through his music. They wanted explanations, emotions, and clarity about everything he had been through. That kind of weight can be overwhelming, even for someone who has lived his entire career in the public eye. For Durk, it wasn't just about proving himself to fans and critics. It was about proving something to himself. Could he step forward without the same mistakes repeating? Could he use his freedom to inspire, to grow, and to create a legacy beyond controversy? These were the questions only he could answer, and the answers wouldn't come from a press statement or a tweet. They would come through his actions, his choices, and ultimately his music. The night after the release date was announced, social media was flooded with stories of fans reflecting on how much his music had impacted them. Some spoke about finding comfort in his lyrics during their hardest times. Others admitted that Durk's songs had motivated them to keep pushing through struggles of their own. That connection between artist and fan base is rare, and it's what made this moment feel so powerful. To them, his release wasn't just his victory, it was theirs too. Still, there were shadows lingering over the celebrations. Some skeptics doubted whether Durk would truly change or whether he would fall back into the same cycle. They pointed to other artists who had moments of redemption only to crash again under the same pressures of fame and lifestyle. For those critics, this release was less of a celebration and more of a test. And while fans pushed back against the negativity, it was clear that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Durk's story had already been filled with highs and lows, victories and tragedies. This new chapter was shaping up to be one of the most defining of his career. Everyone was waiting, not just to see him free, but to see what freedom would mean to him. Would it be another headline in a long series of battles? Or would it be the turning point that finally solidified his legacy as not only a survivor, but a leader? An artist who took his pain and transformed it into something unforgettable. The world was holding its breath, and Lil Durk was at the center of it all. His release date was no longer just a date on a calendar. It was a countdown to history in the making. The closer the release date came, the more it felt like the entire hip-hop world was waiting for a storm to break. It wasn't just fans anymore. Artists, producers, managers, even rivals were tuned in, quietly acknowledging that Lil Durk's return would shift the culture. Everyone knew that when someone with his influence steps back into the spotlight, the ripples travel far beyond music. They touch communities, conversations, and sometimes even politics. For Durk himself, the days leading up to freedom must have been a whirlwind of emotions. Imagine sitting in a space where time moves slowly, every hour stretching longer than the last, while outside people are celebrating and counting down for you. That gap between the reality of confinement and the anticipation of release can play tricks on the mind. But those who knew him closely said he was focused, using those final days to reflect on where he had been and where he wanted to go. People who had visited him shared stories of a man who was calm but determined, who spoke less about the pain of the past and more about what he planned to do differently. He talked about family, about music, and about his desire to make sure his second chance didn't go to waste. For fans, those details only deepened the connection. They weren't just waiting for a rapper to come back. They were waiting for a human being they felt invested in, someone whose growth they wanted to witness firsthand. Meanwhile, the streets of Chicago were alive with energy. In barbershops, corner stores, and clubs, the topic of conversation was the same. What's Durk gonna do when he gets out? Some believed he would come out hungrier than ever, ready to claim the crown in hip-hop. Others thought he might surprise people with a softer, more reflective approach. Either way, there was no denying that his release had become a symbol of hope for many, who felt stuck in their own battles in the music world. The anticipation was like FUL.E artists who had once competed with Durk began showing public support. Big names posted old photos with him, sending messages like, "Can't wait till you're back, bro." The industry understood the magnitude of what was about to happen. It wasn't just another rapper coming home. It was a cultural reset. But with all the excitement came an undeniable truth. Freedom is only the beginning. What you do with it determines everything. For Durk, the challenge wouldn't just be about making music again. It would be about navigating fame, critics, and temptation, all while staying true to himself. The music industry is unforgiving. It celebrates your wins, but doesn't let you forget your mistakes. He knew that once he stepped back into the spotlight, every move would be magnified. Every move would be magnified. Greatest hits trended on streaming platforms. Some fans wrote personal letters online, thanking him for being a source of strength during their darkest moments. Others admitted they had been skeptical of him before. But now they were ready to give him another chance. And then came the morning that everyone had been waiting for. Outside the facility, crowds gathered with posters, cameras, and speakers blasting his songs. Journalists lined up, hoping to catch the first glimpse of him walking out. Security worked overtime to manage the chaos, but the atmosphere wasn't hostile. It was celebratory. The moment the doors opened and Lil Durk stepped out, the cheers were deafening. People cried, people screamed, people held their phones high to capture history. Durk didn't say much in that moment. He didn't need to. His presence spoke louder than words. With a simple nod, a faint smile, and the calm confidence of someone who had endured storms before, he acknowledged the crowd. It wasn't about theatrics. It was about gratitude. That single image, Lil Durk walking out into the daylight. Free, surrounded by love and anticipation, spread across the internet instantly. News outlets called it the biggest release moment in recent hip-hop history. Fans flooded the comments with messages like, "The king is back, and we've been waiting for this day." But beneath the noise, beneath the cameras and celebrations, one thing lingered: the understanding that this was just the beginning. The real story would be written in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Freedom was the opening chapter, but how he used it would define the rest of his career and maybe even his life. The world was ready. The fans were ready. And Lil Durk, stepping into a new chapter, is about to show everyone whether he was ready to. Freedom is powerful, but it's also fragile. When Lil Durk walked out of those gates, the cheers and cameras captured only a small piece of the story. What nobody could capture in that moment were the decisions. Waiting ahead, choices that would either define him as one of the greatest comeback stories in hip-hop or drag him back into the cycle he had worked so hard to escape. The first days after his release were electric. Everywhere he went, people celebrated him like a champion returning home. Studio sessions started almost immediately, with producers eager to send him beats, waiting for his voice to bless their work. Friends and collaborators reached out, some offering support, others trying to ride the wave of his spotlight. But Durk kept his circle tight. He had learned through loss and betrayal that not everyone who smiles in your face truly wants to see you win. Inside the studio, there was a different energy. Those who got a chance to witness his first recordings described them as raw, emotional, and filled with hunger. His lyrics didn't just talk about pain and struggle. They carried the perspective of someone who had faced the edge of everything and was determined to come back stronger. It was clear that he wasn't just making music for charts or streams. He was making music to heal, to reflect, and to remind the world why his voice mattered. Fans felt that shift immediately. Snippets leaked online, and each one sent social media into a frenzy. People weren't just excited about new songs. They were inspired by the fact that Durk was channeling his freedom into creativity instead of chaos. For many, it was proof that he had truly grown. That this wasn't just another cycle of release and controversy, but the start of something different. Still, the weight of expectation loomed over everything. Every lyric, every move, every post was analyzed. Some critics continued to question whether he deserved the spotlight at all, while others praised him as a symbol of redemption. Durk didn't respond directly. Instead, he let the music speak, allowing his art to become the answer to every doubt, every critic, every whisper of negativity. What made this moment even more significant was how much it resonated with people beyond hip-hop. Communities that had never followed rap closely were now paying attention. Commentators on news outlets debated what his story represented. Was it proof that the system could give second chances? Or was it a reminder of how stacked the odds are against people from places like Chicago's South Side? Whatever side you were on, one thing was undeniable. Lil Durk had become bigger than music. He was a cultural conversation, but fame is never a shield from reality. Durk himself admitted privately that he still felt the weight of everything he had lost. Friends gone too soon. Family members taken by violence. Those scars don't disappear with freedom. They linger. They remind. And in many ways, they fuel the urgency behind his work. He knew that tomorrow was never promised. And that's why every moment after his release mattered so much. As weeks passed, the excitement didn't die down. It grew. Rumors of collaborations with major artists spread like wildfire. Talk of a documentary became louder. Fans speculated about tours, albums, and surprise drops. But more than anything, they wanted to see Durk living, smiling, and moving forward. To them, his survival was a victory they shared. And that's the heart of this story. Lil Durk's release date wasn't just about one man walking free. It was about hope, resilience, and the possibility of transformation. It showed fans that even in the darkest times, chapters can close and new ones can begin. Now, as we close this chapter of the video, the story of Lil Durk's courtroom moment and release date will live on as one of the most unforgettable in hip-hop history. But the real story is still unfolding in the studio, on the stage, and in the choices he makes every single day. And that's where we'll leave it for now. If you've been following this journey, you know how powerful and emotional it has been. And if you want to stay connected to every twist, every update, and every story like this one, make sure you're rocking with us right here on Rap Shock. It's a place where hip-hop's biggest moments come to life. Because this isn't just breaking news. This is history in the making.